Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here. Sorry for being late. You know, it's amazing. This is my 5th year at reInvent, and it's getting farther spread out. And when I need to run from the Aria over to the Venetian in, like at 45 minutes, it's hard to do. So what I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. Now, you probably heard about the announcement yesterday that Andy Jassy gave during his keynote, is that we launched 2 new services around file storage. One of those being Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. So what we want to talk about today is how can we scale FSx for Windows to improve the read and write performance by possibly sharding your data set so you can span multiple file systems. So first thing I want to do is actually walk through the creation of a file system. Each file system can store up to 64 terabytes of data, and you can provision up to 2 gigabytes per second throughput. So what happens if you need more than 2 gigabytes per second throughput? Well, one way you can do that is to have multiple file systems underneath the same DFS namespace and shard your data. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to walk through this demo, and we're going to set this up. Then we're going to run a little load against our file systems. And we're going to say, OK, how much load can I get against one file system? Then if I start writing to the same namespace, it's actually pointing to another file system, so I'm able to get even more performance. So that's what we'll build today during this demo. Has anyone yet had the chance to create an FSx for Windows File Server? Yet? Not yet? Well, we just launched it yesterday, so if you get an opportunity to get a chance to do it, please go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my management console, and here in my Amazon FSx console, I'm going to create a file system. Now, I have 2 options, Lustre or Windows File Server. So, of course, we're going to select Windows File Server. And we're just simply going to walk through the wizard here. So I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call it File System A. Next, we're going to go ahead and give it a size. So we're going to provision, say, a terabyte of data. Again, this can be from 300 gigabytes up to 64 terabytes in size. When I tab off, we do have a recommended throughput for that file system based on the storage capacity that I entered. So in this case, it's 16 megabytes per second. So I'm from Texas. So in Texas, the bigger the better. So what I want to do, I want to go a little higher. So I'm not going to go crazy, but let's go ahead and specify a throughput of, say, 128 megabytes per second. And as you can see, I'll just go ahead and leave this up. You can see that we do basically double the throughput. So 8, 16, 32, all the way up to 2 gigabytes a second. Next, as I scroll down, I need to enter in the information around where my file system is going to reside. So I have the option of selecting one of many VPCs in my account. So I'm going to go ahead and select, my eyesight isn't the best, this one here. I've got a VPC dedicated for my demo. I can select which availability zone I want to create my file system in. Also, which subnet my file system will reside in. And of course, the security group. Now, you can have up to 5 VPC security groups associated with FSx for Windows File Server file system. Now, this is a when we create a file system for you, we expose it as an ENI in your VPC. So you have the standard VPC security controls as you would any other ENI. So again, you can associate up to 5 security groups with that file system. You do it at the ENI level, okay? We'll scroll down, and I'm going to associate it with a Microsoft AD that I have set up within Directory Services, okay? I already have one created. It's going to be just example.com. I'll scroll down. Now, we do support encryption of data at rest. We leverage AWS KMS for this. So I'm going to go ahead and use the default key, but if you had a custom CMK, you can go ahead and select that here as well. The maintenance preferences, this is where if I wanted to make a file system consistent incremental backup of my file system, I can identify a 30-minute window each day that that backup is going to occur. Now, if you need to have more frequent backups, you can actually do a user-initiated backup at any time throughout the day. The weekly maintenance is a 30-minute window each week that you can specify that if maintenance is required on your file system, we would take that 30-minute window. We would definitely notify you before, but we would take it. So this is not a weekly occurrence. You know, everyone knows Patch Tuesdays. So if we need to apply a patch, this is the window where we would do it in. So you don't have a preference, leave it no preference. If you have a preference, go ahead and select it here and identify it. Click on Next. We can do a quick review of all the settings that I selected and create the file system. So within a few minutes, the file system will be created. I'm going to go ahead, and I have a couple file systems already created. We're going to dive into the demo. So if I go to I've already logged into an EC2 instance using my 80 credentials, because I'm going to be able to get access to my file system using my 80 credentials because the file system is a part of the domain. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set up a namespace, okay? So we'll go ahead and launch. I wish my eyesight was better. We'll go ahead and launch DFS management. And we're going to create a new namespace. And what we're going to do, we're going to identify two namespace servers. So these are two EC2 instances that you need to run in your environment. We recommend you run them in different availability zones for availability of your namespace. So I'm going to go ahead and browse out to select my first namespace. And if I scroll out here, I know that this is one of my namespace servers. I'll go ahead and select that. Next is going to ask me, what is the name of my namespace? Once I enter that in, I definitely want to add another namespace server for high availability. Because again, if there were an issue with an AZ, because you have namespace servers in both AZs, your namespace will still be available. So the namespace I'm going to use is corp. Going to go ahead and select the default here, the domain-based. And that's it. Now I have my namespace created. Of course, we want to go ahead and expand that. We see how many namespace servers we have, just the one, so we want to add the second. So let's go ahead and add another namespace server. I'm going to select this guy here. He is the other namespace server in the other AZ. After a few seconds, it'll be created, and then I can start creating folders under my namespace. And this is really where we're going to, in a way, shard our data, or at least have a folder structure where you'll be able to shard your data to have a certain group of data hitting one file server and another group of data hitting another file server. All right, so now that we have that created, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a folder. So this first folder, we're going to call it A through F, okay? We're just going to use a very simple alphabetical naming convention. So we want to add a folder target. So these folder targets, we want them hitting two different FSX for Windows file servers. So this is where we actually need to go back to the management console and get the DNS name of our file servers. Whoops. So the two that I created earlier was, we'll start with file system A. So if I expand into this and click on the network and security tab, I'll have the DNS name of my file system. We'll go ahead and use that UNC path. And we're going to go ahead and call the folder A through F. If it doesn't exist, it's going to prompt me to create it. Of course, I will. Now, this is important. You want to go ahead and create this on the D drive of the file server that's backing the FSX for Windows file system, okay? So we'll go ahead and put it there. I'm going to call it A through F. I could call it anything, but I'll call it that. I'm going ahead and change the permissions to allow everyone to have access to it. We'll go ahead and create it, and we're done. So now we've created basically a subdirectory of our namespace, a shared folder A through F, and it's pointing to one file system. Let's go ahead and add another one. Another folder, this one we're going to call, what's the next grouping? G through M. Let's just make sure I've got my script. I don't want to make a mistake. We did go G through M. So that's what we're going to call it. Again, we're going to go ahead and grab the DNS name of this second FSX for Windows file server. So I'll go back to the management console. This time we're going to select file system B. File system C isn't created yet. That's fine. We'll just use file system B. DNS name. UNC path again. And again, we'll go ahead and call this G through M. It's going to ask, hey, this doesn't exist. I'll go ahead and create it. Again, I want to create it on the D drive, G through M. Change the permissions so that everyone has access to it. If it doesn't exist, it's going to prompt me to create it. And there we have it. So now we have two folders under the namespace. So can we access it now? So if we go ahead and just open up File Explorer, how do we access this? So we want to use example. Actually, it's right here. So we go ahead and select that. Now we have access to this folder. So when I create new files, it's being created on the file system that is backing this, what we call sort of shard of data, so A through F or G through M. So let's see what happens if we actually start putting load against this server. So let's go ahead and minimize this. I'll go ahead and launch Task Manager. We'll take a look at the network performance. So we can sort of monitor this real time as what's going on. I've got a few. Good. I've got a few scripts here. I'm using disk speed to test the performance. So this first script is going to write data to the A through F directory, okay? So go ahead and kick that off. And if we look over here, we're going to start seeing some activity, 2.5 gigabits per second. So let's sit here. We can monitor this for a few minutes and see how it performs. Eventually, it'll finish, and then we can run the second one. Then we really want to run both together. And that's really going to be able to now, your application, if your application is writing to the A through F, it can get up to 128 megabytes per second because that's the amount of throughput I provision from my file system. And as it writes to the other folder, it can also get an additional 128 megabytes per second because, again, that's hitting another FSX for Windows file system. So by doing this, you're able to increase both your read and write performance of your file system. So while that's going, we can just go ahead and kick off the other one. We see a very consistent In this other window, we'll go ahead and kick that off. And we should see an improvement. Now we're getting well over 4.5 gigabits per second. Again, much greater than the 128 megabytes per second that I had provisioned. So a lot of this information is available in our user guide. We have step-by-step guides on how to set up DFS namespaces and DFS replication. Really the step-by-steps on how to consolidate multiple shares under a single namespace for namespace consolidation. Again, you can have up to 50,000 file shares under a single namespace, which really allows you to have 3 exabytes of data under a single namespace. So as you add more and more data to your environment, you can spin up additional FSx for Windows file servers, put them under that namespace, and then it's very easy for users to get access to it. They don't have to know the name of the file system. You have an easy-to-use namespace that everyone's familiar with, and you can have it by organization, by group, whatever hierarchy that you have set up. Go ahead and move that over to FSx for Windows, and it'll just work. So I want to thank everyone for your time. Do we have time for questions?
Unfortunately, we do not. Sorry.
We don't? Okay.
I mean,
so
if you want to kind of hang out in the back,
yeah,
we could.
I'll be around here, so if you do have questions, come and find me, and I can answer those for you. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daryl.